joining us. If you're from the BZX community, Chainlink community, or kind of the wider blockchain community, we really appreciate you joining us today. We are joined by Tom Bean, co-founder, BZX, Kyle also co-founder of BZX as well. Really thank you guys for taking the time today to share. And if you're okay, we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, let's do this. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, so let's start with some basic introductions. Maybe Kyle, starting with you first, would just love to know maybe a bit about your background, how you got started in this industry, and maybe how you got started with BZX.
Yeah, sure thing. So I hold a master's degree in computational biology. Before starting BZX, I worked in vaccine research. So when I was a teenager, I started playing a game called Diablo 2 and got interested in how to reverse engineer it. And along the way, I made quite a few friends in the security space. So in 2011, Bitcoin became like a really popular topic among this crowd, and I became interested in blockchains. I wasn't convinced regarding Bitcoin's use as a peer-to-peer cash due to like fiat on-ramp frictions and the network effects of existing money, but I became quite fascinated by colored coins. And when the Ethereum white paper came out, I really appreciated how it generalized all the different colored coin applications in like a single unified platform. So when I left graduate school, I used my knowledge of the space to build the capital that was used to start BZX.
Yeah, and my background's in computer engineering, and I also have a master's in business. And before BZX, I worked for Nokia for about 15 years doing, leading software teams, software architecture. I wore many hats there, but I was following the blockchain space for a while. Ethereum came around. I was very intrigued by that, and I was really looking for something really interesting to sink my teeth into, some kind of new project in the space. And 2017, Kyle and I had the idea for, we knew each other through mutual friends, and we kind of had started talking, had the idea for BZX, and it went from there.
Very cool. Well, it's so interesting to think that all these people from different backgrounds getting together and building things together, Diablo 2, corporate background, and yet here we are all working in the same space. So it's just kind of cool. It's
yeah,
how all this sort of comes together. So I think I'll go ahead and start with, I think, what a lot of people are really interested in, and that's, bZx 2.0, and really kind of exploring what's new, what kind of people can expect, maybe some features that are going to be involved in that, and kind of a general understanding of why they should be excited about this new rollout.
Yeah. So we're hitting all the major pain points people had voiced about version 1.0. So real-time charting, order histories, collateral management, bringing down gas costs. It used to be that you had to refresh Fulcrum each time to see the price update, to see your position update. Now our interface and the trading view charts update in real time. So we made the protocol sleeker, more efficient, consumes less than half the gas of its predecessor. And on top of that, we're adding support for Chi token to further reduce gas costs. So we're also investing heavily in security. We got 19 person weeks of manual auditing by PeckShield and Certic. And on top of all of that, we're getting the contracts formally verified. And of course, we're launching with one of the most aggressive yield farming programs the industry has seen yet. Our protocol is relaunching, and we need to build substantial liquidity. So it's going to be short and concentrated with the intention of providing larger yields than anything we've seen yet.
Yeah, we just want to come back with a bang and just really incentivize people to, just start using the platform heavily. Like Kyle said, we listened to a lot of feedback on what people wanted to see in like the last version of BZX, and kind of tried to, get a lot of that in. So we think people, especially our past users, will be really happy with the new product.
Awesome. Well, no, that sounds fantastic. I know you mentioned a little bit about half the gas costs, which is pretty amazing, because I know that's probably one of the bigger pain points that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, it's killer right now. Yeah. So I mean, that's definitely, we worked, we kind of rebuilt the protocol from the ground up and streamlined stuff as much as possible. So.
Perfect. And then Kyle, kind of building on what you said, I know you talked about a very extensive auditing process, that was involved in that. I don't know if a lot of people understand how big of a deal is that auditing process? I mean, how much resources does it actually take to go through something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of resources, and I think the biggest part is actually getting yourself to be audit ready, to have the code be in like production ready, to have all the tests, to have all the, all the tools running on it. That is the biggest part. So like if you look at just like, Open Zeppelin or Trail of Bits, pre-audit checklist, you already really need to bring the code to such a state that they're not wasting time on the audit going over
Yeah,
things that
fixing obvious bugs and stuff like that. You want to do like substantial testing and bug fixes and all that prior to audit. Otherwise it's it's wasting audit time, and it might delay the audit even more, and they'll end up costing you more. So that's really, we spent a whole lot of time. We've kind of taken our time over the past few months, really trying to do this right.
yeah. And
Awesome.
we have to meet with the auditors every week. They have suggestions, there's constant feedback, both of us working to understand and get this product out. So it is quite time intensive to work with like multiple teams of auditors at the same time, but we're having a great time doing it, and we feel really good about where it's at right now.
Awesome. I think in the end, it's all about having the best product you can have, and it's nice to see you guys taking the time to basically ensure that you have the best kind of secure, most reliable product that you have when you launch.
Definitely. Yep.
Perfect. So I guess getting in, you guys, you mentioned yield farming a little bit. We're going to circle back to that because I know that's a very hot kind of topic and issue. So would love to explore that with you. But I guess before we get there, obviously BZX and Chainlink, I know working together, would love to sort of delve into a little bit about how you're planning to use Chainlink. What purpose does it really serve on 2.0?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Chainlink is heavily embedded into our protocol, where we're pricing all the assets, pricing positions. We're going to be pricing our own token. We're going to have our own Chainlink feed. So it really is core to securing our protocol, having highly secure, decentralized price feeds.
Yeah, like so when we first started building, there was no Chainlink on mainnet. We started building in 2017. So, we didn't have the luxury of plugging into this really secure, battle-tested Oracle network. And in hindsight, we should have, gone with a completely centralized Oracle. But there's, a centralized Oracle is such a painful thing to have to put into your product as someone who is trying to build something that, that's unstoppable. So centralized oracles, they're a single point of failure. They feel like they're admitting defeat. And that's why we were so stubborn about not using one. And so, when somebody performs a margin trade or they deposit collateral, we need to perform a lookup on the exchange rate to make sure that the position is properly collateralized. So it's a very core thing. And without a proper oracle, the whole system is vulnerable to attack. So, to kind of explain like some of the internals of our system here, as positions fluctuate in value, we have a two-tiered system to manage liquidations. The first layer is just a delegated closing contract that allows anybody to close your position for you, provided it's below margin maintenance. So calling the delegated close provides a fixed rate bounty plus a small percentage base reward. And to ensure the position is below margin maintenance, we call Chainlink oracles to verify the exchange rate. So somebody can't prematurely close the position or manipulate the prices of exchanges to collect the bounties on every open position. So we think this is really fantastic and efficient system for liquidating. It's separate from the core contracts, but we believe it's the most capital efficient manner of liquidating. So currently there's tens of millions of dollars that are siphoned away from lending protocol users going towards liquidation bots and miners. We want our protocol to avoid participating in this kind of waste as much as possible. And then the second tier of our liquidation infrastructure is built into the core protocol contracts. So we simply allow liquidators to purchase collateral at a discount. To determine the appropriate exchange rate of the collateral, we use Chainlink price feeds. So without a robust price feed, premature liquidations could be triggered at a great loss to the traders. And then, as Tom said, we're using Chainlink for our liquidity mining program. So we think this is actually a first. Loopring had like a really interesting use of Chainlink to price their token and secure their system. Like for us, Chainlink is securing our liquidity mining program. So like the first stage of the liquidity mining program is just it's like a brute subsidy to aggressively bootstrap deep liquidity for a protocol that's just starting. but from a fresh pool of liquidity. But the second phase of our program is aimed at making the protocol sticky to the users that matter, the ones driving the cash flow. So each time a trader or borrower generates a fee by using the protocol, they earn half as much in BZRX. So we determine the exchange rate of BZRX using Chainlink oracles. There's no other way to implement a program like this trustlessly.
Very cool. I love the different use cases where, you know, different teams are using it for different things, but I think that's a very cool use case, and does it in a decentralized manner. I guess getting back to decentralization, you know, what's the value of using kind of a decentralized Oracle network on BZX?
Well, it's really removes the element of trust. You know, we don't want a single point of failure. Since Chainlink has, you know, multiple vetted data sources, it's much better than just a centralized Oracle. And also, you know, a centralized Oracle might be dependent on the team, or like a script running on a server or something like that. So you know, we want to kind of eliminate that and decentralize things as much as possible. And also, you know, we want to build unstoppable applications. So we don't want something that governments can, you know, and regulators can shut down easily.
Yeah, exactly. You can't have unstoppable applications without decentralized oracles. And you just don't want your entire application, you're building this entire edifice, and you don't want it to be ultimately dependent on some script on an AWS server, consistently running, not bugging. And you know, so that is just, it's such a weakness if that's how everything can be taken down. And supposedly you have, you know, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars being secured by what ends up being like a script on an AWS server.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think that's one of the challenges we've seen before in the past, where half the internet essentially goes down because, you know, there's AWS in Georgia or that part of that region, and then literally half the internet goes down when that data, like when that you know, AWS farm goes down. So yeah, very interesting. And I think you're right. I think that's sort of the future, is it getting to a point where you build something and you know that 100 years from now, or even longer, you know, it can outlive you. And there could be a point where you're able to step away almost completely from it itself, and it just operates without having to have someone, you know, with their hands on the controls all day, every day. So perfect. So getting to yield farming, which I mentioned before, is definitely one of the hottest things. Would love to have your thoughts and kind of ideas on maybe sort of yield farming in general. I know you touched on a little bit, Kyle, on how that works in your system, but when this kind of first popped up a couple months ago, maybe not even that long, you know, what are your kind of thoughts after seeing sort of what you've seen go on in this space?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we've been watching, you know, the yield farming phenomenon and people talking about it, and we feel like people have been treating yield farming as this monolithic phenomenon, and it's the wrong way to look at it. So even Vitalik on a recent Unchained podcast, Laura Shin, he said that he views yield
not sustainable.
Yeah, as unsustainable. And more critically, I mean, that's correct. It is unsustainable, but more critically, he said having no lasting effects. And I think this isn't true. Vitalik was looking at the yield farming program of Compound and making this judgment. And it was true for Compound, but not broadly. So what long-term effects is liquidity mining having for Compound? Was it not liquid before? Were there use cases or applications that were stymied by a lack of liquidity? The answer is no. Liquidity mining has simply functioned as a marketing tool with no clear long-term benefits. But that's not the case across each class of protocol. When you apply liquidity mining to programmatic liquidity protocols like Balancer and Uniswap, something magical happens. It creates a virtuous cycle where there's more liquidity, and that attracts more traders and users, which further attracts users, which builds the kind of real network effects necessary to challenge the network effects of centralized exchanges. The implementation of yield farming on Balancer is an inspired idea with long-term ramifications for its future. And there's another aspect to this as well. Liquidity mining is great for protocols that need to bootstrap liquidity. When a protocol is initially launching, a liquidity mining program is appropriate to bootstrap its liquidity. Balancer checked both of these boxes when they implemented their program. So when we launch again, we will have a fresh liquidity pool that needs to be bootstrapped. And liquidity mining is an excellent way to accomplish that. But as a lending protocol, you need to ask why you're continuing to mine liquidity if you're already liquid. That's why our program is targeted and short-lived. We're looking to accomplish a specific goal. Liquidity mining has great power to incentivize activity, but we need to be asking if it's incentivizing the kind of productive activity that builds network effects, or if it's simply acting as a subsidy that distorts the overall market. The community needs to be asking more pointed questions like, what network effects are you creating with your yield farming program? And it shouldn't be credulous regarding when liquidity is a network effect and when it's not.
Very
Yeah, the
interesting.
first 3 months we're going to be really aggressive in the incentives we're paying out. So yeah, that's because we really want to bootstrap things right in the beginning.
Well, no, it sounds interesting, Kyle, kind of what you were talking about, how there's almost like a spectrum, and how things are, there may be one type that's over here of yield farming and one type that's kind of over here. And that the idea is that these protocols can basically learn from each other. This is what went right. This doesn't work for us. This does work for us. And then ultimately you can create something that, drives benefits to your community, to your users for, as you said, a limited amount of time to accomplish a certain goal. And then once that goal is accomplished, you can maybe it ends, you can reflect on it, what's kind of the next step of the process.
Yeah, I think it's
Yep.
just wonderful, the kind of experimentation that's going on. And it's really needed to kind of like, you can theorize about it, but to actually see it in practice and how it actually unfolds is so critical to appreciating the nuances of the mechanism design that you need to deliver on.
Okay. Yeah, very cool. I guess, Tom, let me put this one on you first.
Mm-hmm.
In DeFi right now, what do you think as a person building, every day, every night, what do you think are kind of like the biggest challenges or the hurdles that the space is facing? What do you think kind of has to happen next for kind of all of us to take the next step?
Well, I think we want to eat CeFi because I mean, DeFi is, especially the last few months, has been growing so rapidly. A lot of it thanks to the yield farming experiments. But I think that's we want to keep growing in this growing DeFi. Competing with CeFi. They and in many aspects we're still a drop in the bucket compared to CeFi, but we're catching up, and we intend to really catch up.
Yeah, so like, I completely agree with Tom. DeFi needs to eat CeFi, and that should be our North Star. People talk about, oh, how do we go mainstream? And that's just getting way ahead of yourself. We don't need to go mainstream. Crypto needs to go mainstream, and the use cases of crypto needs to go mainstream. But what DeFi needs to do is to first focus on beating CeFi. So that should be our North Star. People say that the user experience for DeFi is poor, but if you look at the workflow and the frictions associated with using DeFi, they're far leaner and less frictional than any centralized alternative. The user experience pitfalls right now are all happening on the consensus layer. So the most common complaints we hear from users are that gas prices are too high and that they've run into an issue with the gas auctions when submitting their transaction. So we need two big things in order to start competing with CeFi. And that's first, something like EIP 1559. We need to get away from this ridiculous UX around tipping and gas auctions where people are like, oh, I can't put in any more transactions because it needs to mine the transaction of the lowest nonce. And now my entire MetaMask is broken.
Yeah,
And
and
how
people
do I
don't know what
fix
they're
this?
doing. They might have a bunch stacking up, and they got they're just stuck for hours because they can't figure out what's going on. So.
And I've had friends that have used crypto since 2011 who still run into problems where their MetaMask gets jammed up with a backlog and they're trying to fix it. They even understand how the problem works, but it's still a pain to solve. And so I think like this user experience problem is the number one thing that is making DeFi less attractive. And then it's the gas cost. So we need scalability on layer one that doesn't add extra steps. So like these layer two solutions, they always add the extra step of depositing. And that's like the same pitfall that really depositing into centralized exchanges have. Like the one difference is that the centralized exchanges at least like wait for more confirmations, which is sort of like an even bigger piece of friction. But for DeFi with layer 2, that it still creates friction that is really important for us to avoid if we're going to beat CeFi. So like, and just to kind of hammer in the DeFi UX, you can go on Fulcrum and get a 4 times long leverage position on Link in 3 clicks.
Just a few clicks, yeah.
Without depositing and waiting for confirmations. And and then when you withdraw, you have to wait for that as well. And then you're paying fees both way in. So the only thing holding us back right now is really the consensus layer. The user experience is so dialed in otherwise.
Yeah, understood. And I'm sure you get this too, being on top and dealing with gas, where you get a user that has difficulty, or at least maybe in version 1.0 you did, and the first thing they do is hop in and say, hey, I'm having a problem with your platform. But in reality, it has nothing to do, with BZX. It has to do with what's going on in the network. And that,
right.
They used 30 Gwei, which 6 months ago might have gotten the first block mined. And now all of a sudden,
now you got to
like,
wait hours. Yeah.
Or we'll see you in 4
days.
hours.
Yeah.
They're days. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. And unfortunately, like, users, they tend to blame us or the project when, we have nothing to do with it. We try to help them through the problem, but it's kind of something that everyone in this space is dealing with right now.
Yeah, and it allows this sort of narrative to grow that like, oh, DeFi still has a long way to go with user experience, which really could not be farther from the truth.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely an interesting take. We had a great question from the audience, which I'd like to jump in here. And if anybody in the audience does have any questions, please feel free to ask. We'll certainly try to pick a couple. Do you think, you mentioned, I know Tom specifically, DeFi eating CeFi.
Yep.
Is there a world where there is a combination that ever makes sense? Is there a place where you could see a protocol that's, we're part CeFi over here, we're part DeFi over here? Like, do you think it could ever really like coexist or work that way? Or is it clearly one or the other?
You want to take this one, Kyle?
It's a really interesting question. I think that ultimately it's going to be DeFi, but I think that what we have seen is that there has been a lot of success from protocols that try to combine both elements of it. So, there are still reduced frictions from these sort of hybrid systems. And we see it with, things like Loopring. We see it, Diversify, IDEX. IDEX was super popular for quite a long time. So there is some product market fit for this, instant execution, non-custodial sort of combination. And, I can see it definitely succeeding. But I think that, it's as time goes on and as things become better for DeFi and the network effects of DeFi really take off in terms of liquidity, I think more and more things will be shifting towards true DeFi. And, it's amazing that DeFi is able to grow and accumulate the network effects that it has with all of the barriers that it's facing at the consensus layer. But when those barriers are gone and DeFi actually has more liquidity, these network effects will be just completely insurmountable to any sort of centralized competition.
Wow. Yeah, no, I think that's great. So it sounds like maybe short term, there's been some things that have worked, but you really feel that long term, I guess the advantages of DeFi will far outweigh the advantages of CeFi once some things kind of on the consensus layer get fixed. Yeah. Perfect. So I guess going into that, are there any layer 2 solutions that, Kyle, you touched on this a little bit, you still got to deposit into a layer 2, which essentially, you're just repeating it again. Any layer 2 solutions that you gentlemen have seen that look interesting, that look like, oh, maybe with a tweak, maybe that's something, or do you feel essentially, we're just at the stage where everything's got to be done, on the Ethereum base level?
Yeah, I think we are, and I think it does depend who you are to some extent, but it's been pretty clear to us every time that we see a layer 2 solution, it has the same problem. The liquidity is siloed. So for like a dApp like us, who is highly composed with other DeFi dApps, it's a complete issue that it has siloed liquidity, and it just becomes a non-starter every time. And with the exception of like all of DeFi coordinating jointly to move to some layer 2 solution, it I just don't see DeFi really being a layer 2 thing. I see DeFi being a layer 1 thing. And I think people want it to be a layer 2 thing just because layer 2 is so much more, like it seems so much more reachable as a scalability solution versus like sharding and real scaling on the consensus layer. So people want to make it happen, but it keeps not happening. And I don't think it's because of small issues in various implementations, like, oh, this roll up just needed one thing different. It's the fundamental aspect of the silo liquidity that, in my opinion,
Yeah.
I think our opinion is
It'll
basically
be interesting to see what happens with Ethereum 2.0, but it's 1.0 doesn't seem like it's going anywhere for a while. People, that's where the place to be right now.
Yeah, we're always keeping our eyes open to see, who's migrating where and why. But I think, we're just noticing everybody like on our app, like in our specific corner, seems to be largely ignoring layer 2. There's people like synthetics who can move because they're not really composed with the liquidity, the underlying ecosystem. They can just get price information, like they're trading based off of price information. So they have Chainlink price feeds, and they don't need to be on layer 1 getting liquidity from 0x or Kyber or some exchange protocol. And so that will work for them. But for us who, like, if we want to interact with other DeFi dApps that perform exchange and all of that, we can't go on layer 2. And so I think we're just going to we're going to continue seeing this trend of people working on layer 2 and it not getting almost any traction from most of the DeFi ecosystem, with the exception of maybe the derivatives.
So it sounds like it's kind of a composability challenge, that essentially
Yep.
you can't have all the money Legos unless everyone either decides to migrate together, which by the nature of the
All of
space
DeFi
is
on
likely
one chart or something like that.
yeah. By the nature of the space, I don't really see that happening.
And even when we migrate to Ethereum 2.0, if you look at the current specs, DeFi composability is still a challenge there. So, some dApps might be able to go off onto their own shard. But like a dApp like ours will need to be co-located with the other DeFi dApps.
Yeah, the ones providing the liquidity that we need.
Yeah, exactly. And so in some ways, the big benefit we see of Ethereum 2.0 is going to be getting these damn Ponzi's off of our out of our network, so they stop clogging us up. If like it was just DeFi hanging out on one shard, then it would probably be a lot more manageable to do these transactions, and we could kick the can down the road until they can figure out how to do asynchronous cross-shard communication, because that's really the holy grail of what we're looking for.
Awesome. Perfect. Very cool. We had another question for the audience, what I thought was interesting is, how do you guys feel about governance, or, your tokens? Are there going to be any sort of governance that come with those, or is there any kind of governance layer in bZx?
You want to take this, Tom? Or
yeah, definitely. I mean, we announced a while back the Bzx Dow, and we're still moving in that direction. On day one, when we relaunch, we're going to have where you can stake and participate in governance, and we're still on track to fully decentralized with a DAO. So we're all about governance.
Yeah, if they're not familiar, we proposed a pretty novel governance structure that kind of takes inspiration from the checks and balances we see broadly across Western democracies. We're trying to learn the lessons from the last 300 years of trying to build systems of governance that work, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel or doing something totally different. And we think there's great promise in it. So in our system, there's a legislative branch and an executive branch. The code is law, so that's the judicial branch. Thank you, Ethereum, for solving law like that. And so, people can stake to the representatives. So it's a liquid representative democracy. The representatives can pass by majority vote a proposal. The executive can veto it or accept it. Also, the representatives could, by unanimous vote, kick out the executive. So we're the executive by default, and we're keeping our share of the ownership below 50%. So we can't get through any proposals that we want unilaterally. We need the consent of the community. But at the same time, if something happens to us, we're not a single point of
They
failure.
can replace us.
Because so we'd be replaced. So by keeping our ownership in this kind of sweet spot where we can like definitely stop anybody who's trying to mess with the protocol, but at the same time, like we have to work with the community and we're not critical, we feel like we're checking off all the boxes of what we really want to see from governance. And it's still practical to like do things like respond to bugs. So like, you know, some of these governance systems, it's all completely public and, you know, and this whole process. What if somebody finds a critical bug and can drain the contracts? Like it would be great if they could come to the executive or something like that, and they have a limited pause button that's allotted to them by their representatives. They can press it, come to the representative, say, hey, okay, protocol's paused. Here's how we need to fix this and get it through. So we took even like security and kind of responding to incidents into consideration in this like governance system that hopefully doesn't even really need any one party to be involved.
No, I think that's an interesting approach. I think that the biggest challenge I've seen with governance systems is sort of this. It seems like it's challenging to get it right. I think it's challenging for Western democracies to get it right. So I think it's also going to be challenging for anybody to get it right. But that right, you know, how can you stop a malicious actor from doing something truly malicious in a single vote? But at the same time, how can you create a system that's fair where people feel like their vote or they've staked to a representative and that actually matters and they see things changing, you know, based on their viewpoints or their opinions.
Right.
Yeah, that's probably a PhD in that alone. Maybe some days we'll see like you know, blockchain governance as a no, because I just think, I mean, it's pretty fascinating when you get into a lot of people want to do it a lot of different ways. I think we're still, you know, relatively early. I don't know if there's ever going to be a winner per se. I think it's what works right for you and your community is ultimately going to be what's right, and what works for someone else may never work for you. So
right.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, I'm just checking here to see if we have any more questions. I guess, yeah. So the biggest one, I guess, is update wise coming from you guys. Do you guys have any kind of time frame, any sort of goals you're shooting for 2.0? Anything people could look out for, maybe, you know, in the near term or on the horizon?
Yeah, so we've been telling people, and that's obviously what we're shooting for is August 31st Hawaii time to relaunch. That we said the end of the month, so that's the very latest, about the latest we can do. So that's really our goal for relaunch. Kyle, do you want to give some more?
Yeah. So, you know, we're coming out Trade 2.0, all these new features.
Yep.
We're also coming out a little bit later. We're like, the design has been finalized. You know, it's just all our front end engineers are so swamped. We're coming out with something called Fulcrum Pro. So what we've noticed is that like our interface works so well for people who are not very seasoned or experienced margin traders, but it actually confuses people who are very experienced margin traders because
it's not what they're used to on other platforms. So
they've grown accustomed to this like Coinbase Pro type feel or this Binance type feel where there's trading pairs and everything's kind of where they already know it. So, you know, I had a friend who's like a professional, you know, arbitrage trader. He's very experienced using these systems. And when he came to Fulcrum, he was so confused and he's like, wait, I'm going long on ETH against what? What does that mean? And whereas like the average person's like, oh, I'm just going long on ETH. Great, 4 times. Go 4 times ETH up. I'm 4 times up. My friend was like, I can't proceed from here. This is too confusing. I need more things specified. So that's what we're doing. We're coming out with Fulcrum Pro. It's going to have swaps. We're on the horizon. We're looking at two different areas, really making that swaps interface really work for us, have like aggregation capabilities and really pushing on that front. And then on the other front is we're looking closely at perpetual swaps.
Yep.
So actually, this is a
Next
use
big
case
thing.
with a Chainlink.
Yeah.
We're looking at a perpetual swap that has all the properties people want, no impermanent loss, using Chainlink and all that. So that's an active research right now.
Yeah, we're real excited, and we can achieve a lot higher leverage with that, and so yeah, that's going to be a big thing coming.
Yeah. So one thing we realized was that, like, at first we kind of had this really great lending product called Archimedes that we were super excited for because it would always beat everybody else in terms of price discovery. So the lending rates would always be higher, the borrowing rates would always be lower than everybody else. And we really were excited by that. We're like, oh wow, how will they deal with the fact that, like, we could consistently always beat them on price? But unfortunately, with the yield farming craze, it's distorted the market to such a great extent, and it, like, really complicate. Like, you would have to keep adding new things and make sure it's yield farming aware, and then the value prop of it has become greatly diminished given the new competitive landscape. But what we're trying to focus on is getting volume from trading, because this is where the real cash flows are. Lending is great, but trading cash flows are amazing. And who are the people making the most in this ecosystem? Like BitMEX, Binance, those are the kind of people whose breakfast we want to eat, more or less.
Very interesting. Well, cool. And thank you for the teaser as well. I guess before we wrap this up, anything else that either you gentlemen would like to say, would like to talk about before I kind of ask the sort of, what do you do when you're not doing DeFi question in the spare time that you probably don't have? But anything else you gentlemen wanted to touch on before we get there?
No, I think that's pretty good. I feel like we covered quite a bit there. So
yeah, if any of you listening want to hear more about this, we go into certain things in more detail. We also have a community call on Friday, so feel free to join that.
Awesome. I'll get the link from you guys. We'll put that in the description as well, and just highlight that for people that can deep dive. But so it's kind of my last question as we wrap this up. I'll start with you, Tom. When you're not working and you're not involved in DeFi, maybe you've got an hour a day where you're not sleeping or working. What do you like to do outside of this? You got a hobby, something that you enjoy that's not related at all to blockchain?
It seems like I work so much, much to frustration of my wife, but yeah, we have a baby on the way coming, just a couple months, another baby, I have my son, so a lot of family stuff, and like to get a gym workout in there when I can, but just feel like it's all work lately. So
yeah, I was gonna say, I know for a fact that Tom doesn't do anything else but this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I try, I'm working on the work-life balance, but I haven't totally figured that out yet.
Me and my wife were surprised he had time to make a kid, to be honest. We were like, where do you find
stuff happens during COVID, so
So yeah, I mean, me and my wife are working on having a family as well. That's one activity, and then I coded this up, so I kind of enjoy kind of like coding 3D visual art, and did some painting as well. If you check my Telegram picture, it's
his Telegram background is his painting.
And I enjoy writing and singing parody songs, so that's another thing that I like. I like creative pursuits and all of that. So yeah.
I used to have hobbies. Gotta find some hobbies again. Besides work.
Yeah, well, you're about to launch something huge, so obviously it's eyes on the prize for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
Hopefully after your successful launch, be able to take maybe a breather for a little while and get a reset. But congratulations, Tom, on the expecting child. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Kyle, certainly wish you the best of luck with yours as well. I have 2 daughters. It's the most incredible thing ever, the most frustrating thing ever, the most incredible thing. It's amazing. It's like everything wrapped up into one thing, I feel like. But
exactly.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I always tell everybody. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, gentlemen, for both joining us again. Tom and Kyle from bZx. Yeah, it was. This was a lot of fun. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put In the description, we'll put all the, BZX community links. I'll get the link from you for your community call as well. If someone kind of wants to deep dive and really get involved, I think it'd be a great opportunity for them to do so. And really looking forward to watching, 2.0 come out, seeing the community reaction. And then hopefully after that, a little bit down the road, we can have you guys back on and you can kind of discuss what the next phase is, because it's always, this is great, and then we're always working on something else. That's usually the nature.
Sounds great. Sounds good.
Perfect. Well,
Thanks
thank you again,
having us
gentlemen,
so
for
much,
joining
Rory.
us. Absolutely. You guys
All right, thanks
have
a
a
lot.
great day, and look forward to chatting with you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Take care.